Hi everyone, this is Mike Rago with CloudKnox. Appreciate the time today. Um, CloudKnox itself, we focus on cloud permissions management. So in conjunction with what we'll cover today in terms of cloud permissions management, we'll also have Mark the Magician have certain steps at which he'll actually do some magic tricks and make this very interactive for all of you. So to kick things off, in terms of cloud permissions management, we are, a partner of GuidePoint, and as a result, have a variety of mutual customers that leverage our solution for helping manage their hybrid cloud and the permissions, and really shore up their security in terms of their permissions management across AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and interestingly enough, VMware and vSphere as well, both on-prem as well as in the cloud. We leverage an activity-based approach, which means kind of moving from traditional RBAC assumptions-based approaches. We're actually looking at the ongoing activity across these different cloud service providers to provide deep insights specific to the permissions, what's been set versus what is actually being used, and of those permissions, which ones are high risk, and then introduce perhaps risks that you may want to avoid across your cloud infrastructures. Additionally, if we take a closer look at where this challenge stems from, it has a lot to do with traditional approaches based around assumptions. When onboarding individuals, when deploying your cloud infrastructure from the stack, from the bottom to the top, when looking at all of these permissions that comprise everything and really imply access across your resources as well, taking an assumptions-based approach means, hey, I think I may know what people may need access to. I'll start there, maybe incorporate some security best practices. But what you quickly determine is this environment grows like a carbon life form, whether it's an individual cloud service provider or multiple ones. And the problem becomes more complex as you introduce additional cloud service providers and as a result, additional authorization models. So what we essentially do is provide that activity-based monitoring. So we're now looking what every individual is actually doing within the cloud architecture to understand what permissions they're actually using versus what's been assigned. And of those permissions, which ones are high risk. So it gives you more of a view into the actual activities going on in the environment to more properly right-size permissions, and also provide a mechanism through automation to help in right sizing and getting to a point of least privilege. And then we also incorporate aspects of anomalies. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mark for the first magic trick. And go ahead, Mark. Looking forward to seeing your first magic trick.
Hey guys, how we doing today? Remember, give me a thumbs up because I can't hear you. That's a clap, do all that. I'm sorry. You probably can't hear me with this thing on. Sorry about it. Let me get rid of that. I got this. All right. There I am. Hi guys, how you doing today? Nice to see everybody. And I asked the guys over there and I said, what is the cloud? Because I always heard about the cloud, never really knew what it was. But basically, it's like your computer is a box and it's got a bunch of information in it. So we're just gonna put a little security blanket over my information in my box right here. And I got some information that I want to put in there. So we're gonna take that information, put it right inside the box here. And what your information does when it goes to the cloud, it just kind of rises up, floating into the air, and then it heads up to the cloud until you're ready to see it again, and it disappears. And that's what your cloud's all about. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Great trick. So jumping back into this then, if we take a look at aspects of permissions management, it's one of the key things we find is that of these permissions, even a single command can be quite damaging and ruin a portion of or an entire component of your cloud infrastructure. And in addition to that, there's been a lot of cloud breaches over the last few years. For example, the Cloud Security Alliance released a recent report around 11 prominent cloud breaches. Interestingly enough, in looking at these, they break down the tactics, techniques, and procedures used for a lot of these breaches. Some of them very prominent, very household names for many of us. But One systemic risk across all of them is really around over-permissioned access, both stemming from permissions assigned to identities and their access to resources across roles, groups, policies, and individual permissions. If we break down one of these very prominent breaches, this was for a very large financial services organization, certainly the breach, it originated from a breach of the application firewall, their web application firewall, that is, with a server-side request forgery. But what's really interesting is, as we've seen a maturity in terms of these different types of cloud breaches, it goes beyond the perimeter, meaning that as the attacker has gained access to the cloud infrastructure environment, it's leveraging those over-permissioned access and permissions in general that allows the attacker to move laterally, perform privilege escalation, and ultimately some form of exfiltration. In this particular circumstance, the attacker was able to gain access to a particular IAM role and an individual identity, which really had been designed for a sole purpose in support of an application. But because the permissions had been over-assigned, ultimately the attacker was able to footprint and map out the rest of the cloud infrastructure that it was allowed access to, thus uncovering more than 700 other S3 buckets across the environment. This ultimately led to finding one of those S3 buckets that contained more than 100 million customer records. So we take a step back and look at this for a second. This had to do with permitted access. So once the identity had been breached, these were permissions that the identity actually had. So in terms of identifying the activity, this was no different than any other activity across all the other identities within the infrastructure. But looking at this from an anomaly perspective and based on what permissions the identity normally used, there was a huge delta or huge deviation. And as a result, there was a huge uptick in activity, both in terms of what permissions were being used that had never been used before, and the time in which a lot of this activity occurred, which was really more representative of scripts, really mapping out 700 other S3 buckets in a matter of minutes. So there's a lot of anomalies there, and it all really circles back with the permissions themselves. So if we start to map this out from a cyber kill chain perspective, but more tuned specifically to cloud infrastructure, a lot of these recent cloud breaches have really moved beyond the perimeter and are quite more mature than just looking at your perimeter configuration, meaning that aspects of infiltration were exploiting these unneeded and over-permissioned permissions assigned to all of these identities, as we showed on the last slide. Secondly, if we look at privilege escalation and lateral movement, there are other aspects to this that allow the attacker, again, based on over-permissioned access, to move around from subscription to subscription and also leverage misconfigurations in terms of the role-based access. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Mark.
All right. Hi, everybody. Well, we're going to demonstrate a firewall for you. Okay. So music. So anybody can get your data.
That's great. Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.
So, in terms of what Mark was just talking about and, looking beyond the firewall, right, there's still a lot of holes that you need to be concerned about. And this becomes increasingly difficult in the cloud. So when we think beyond just shoring up the perimeter security, what you may have exposed to the outside world, whether it be S3 buckets, EC2 instances, Azure blobs and containers, and more, um, really managing this becomes difficult, if not impossible. There's tens of thousands of permissions. For example, in AWS, a default user gets 8,000 default permissions. Same thing for Azure, and similarly for GCP, as well as VMware, where there's hundreds of permissions that are assigned by default unless properly modified. In addition, how this is done in the cloud and the authorization models behind it also vary quite a bit. So if you have a hybrid cloud combined of GCP and Azure, or AWS and GCP, or any of those combinations, it requires a deep understanding of each and every one of those cloud service providers and the relevant authorization models. Some interesting statistics in addition to what we highlighted earlier in the context of what was provided by the Cloud Security Alliance. By 2023, 75% of security failures will result from inadequate management of identities, access, and privileges. And this is up from what was really provided this year in the context of roughly 50%. But where does this really stem from? What can we learn from it in terms of shoring up these permissions within our own environments? The chaos that is occurring right now stems from a number of different things. Again, these diverse computing environments and workloads means that even every day as we log into these various cloud environments and cloud service providers, there are new services, new forms of resources, and additionally new permissions that are being added almost on a daily basis. How do you stay ahead of that? How do you keep up with it? How do you distinguish of those permissions, which ones are high risk? And of those, which ones could allow mass destruction? Could any of those high risk permissions furthermore allow for delete and allow people to destroy infrastructure and exploit it in other ways? Also, the pace of automation and innovation. Remember now, developers and others many times have access to the entire stack. This is very different than 20 or 30 years ago, where you would have a network team, where you would have a server team, where you would have a database team. Now, developers and other folks within the infrastructure can spin up an entire virtual stack, including the VM, including storage, including databases and Elasticsearch and many other capabilities. And this can be done in 10 minutes or less from beginning to end. And as we mentioned earlier, beyond disparate authorization models is a huge exponential growth in identities, including service accounts or non-human accounts. Currently today, service accounts outnumber human accounts 5 to 1, and it's anticipated by 2023, that'll be 20 to 1. So this is more than just looking at human identities. As we've mentioned, service accounts or non-human identities outnumber human accounts. And so it involves really looking at both. So this proliferation of permissions, roles, services, resources, and more is truly growing like a carbon life form. So we'll talk more about how you can identify that risk and then talk a little bit about how CloudKnox helps with that too. Back to you, Mark.
Hey everybody, how we doing? Well, I'm gonna show you something. Mike talked about the 5 risks to your infrastructure. I'm gonna introduce you to one of them right here. So let me. He's kind of a weird looking guy here. Let me get his eyeballs in here. There we go. And
I am a permission gap.
Oh, he's getting alive already. You got prematurely alive. Here we go. There we go. Look at that. And okay. I think he's looking a little bit more lively now. Ooh, look at that. Come on. Easy there, guy there. Who are you?
I am a permission gap.
Ooh. Oh. What are you?
I slide into your cloud. I can be a human or not, a service account bot or whatever.
Huh. You're pretty scary there. So I don't know about.
Hey, I'm looking for a job.
you're looking for a job?
Can I be your super administrator?
Okay, that's enough of that guy. All right, let's get rid of him. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark. So perfect segue, permissions gap. So in the context of a permissions gap and really trying to understand what do we mean by that, as we mentioned, across, a couple of those key platforms we mentioned earlier, including AWS, Azure, and GCP, are thousands upon thousands of permissions, 8,000 plus in AWS, 8,000 plus in Azure, definitely thousands within GCP and hundreds within VMware as well. But in addition, of these permissions, what is the impact to our environment? More than 95% of identities found in assessments that we do can adversely impact the infrastructure, meaning they have some of those high-risk permissions that have been assigned either by design or many times by accident due to a lack of understanding of those high risk or even delete type permissions. And as a result, more than 50% through toxic combinations can actually destroy the infrastructure. Probably one of the most impactful permissions that we see is, when we do assessments for customers for various organizations, we find that the permissions being used versus what's been assigned is less than 10%. So on average, each identity within your environment is using less than 10% of the permissions that have been assigned. And that's what really results in this huge permissions gap. Bottom line, what's been assigned versus what's actually being used. So how we look at this then, how we look at this problem is CloudKnox looks at a variety of kind of hidden risks that go undetected many times within many organizations that we work with and the assessments that we do. These include aspects of inactive identities, as well as people who have admin root, super admin type capabilities. Also, a lack of understanding what permissions people are actively using versus what's been assigned. And furthermore, aspects that may be unique to the cloud service provider, such as the ability for role chaining or cross-account access. Through various policies and roles and permissions, how could people with certain types of access move around from subscription to subscription or account to account? If basically aspects of lateral movement or potentially privilege escalation. And then also aspects of anomalous behavior. And we'll talk what's really unique about this anomalous behavior. Start to take a look at the activity of what's going on in the environment versus purely just looking at it from a security perspective. So let's talk about these five. First is one that's fundamental to most environments, which is, inactive identities, inactive resources, inactive roles, policies, and more. As the environment grows over time, you start to find that you have a subset of identities, either service accounts or human identities, that become inactive. This may stem from people leaving the company, a business relationship you no longer have, and a variety of other reasons. The point here, though, is how do I identify that? And you may identify that by someone alerting you from human resources or other things. We do it based on activity. So when we see an account go dormant, when we see a resource no longer used, when we see a role that used to be used for certain functions that now is no longer being used, we're able to calculate that based on activity or lack thereof. So by default, we'll set this to 90 days. And if we see any of these things go dormant for more than 90 days, you'll get an alert that you've got a dormant account, a resource, a role, and other types of things to allow you to do cleanup work within the environment. And for that, we provide automation as well. Secondly is around super identities. When I work with customers day in and day out across all of these different cloud service providers, the one common thread that I always find is that when trying to determine what permissions to assign to an individual identity, to a group of people or more, is that all these organizations don't understand enough about all the risks and permissions that are included in those 8,000 permissions. And even though I do this day in, day out in working with organizations, even for myself, it's really hard to understand and distinguish those 2,000 plus permissions that are high risk, that are peppered across all the different tasks in your environment, compounded by the fact that new permissions are being added every day by these cloud service providers as they offer up new services. It's really impossible to keep up with, and you definitely need to leverage some kind of tool and automation to do that. Effectively, what can be done with this, as you might expect, are different aspects of either insider threat, where people can assign additional permissions for themselves, like an individual user who could create a dummy account for themselves that now they can use for nefarious things rather than their own identity, thus allowing them to cover their tracks. And there are a variety of other things that we cover at many of the top security conferences and chapter meetings around a lot of those risky and high risk permissions. The other fundamental thing, systemic problem that we see across each and every organization is that around over-permissioned active identities. Again, initial rule sets, initial policies are set from the beginning based on assumptions. Hey, you're a DBA, so I'm going to kind of give you some of these permissions. I'll give you some extra ones in case you need it. But how are you actually calculating that? Some of it's based on, well, this is your job function, so I think you're going to need access to some of this stuff. But you find that once you've set that, you quickly deviate from it. Some products traditionally will also include a baseline security policy. So you can say, well, I'm not going to give you some of these permissions. But again, after you've set that on day one, whether you're using that in native cloud across these CSPs or a third-party product, is that after day one, you see a huge deviation of that. As the environment grows like a carbon life form, that no longer applies. You have people assigning other people permissions. You find that a lot of the permissions you provided are not being used, and you ended up in this scenario of over-permissioned access. Cross-account access also can be quite dangerous. And as these permissions are assigned and roles are defined, there are policies behind that that allow access to other subscriptions, allowing an individual identity to access things in other subscriptions and move around laterally across the cloud infrastructure. You may have one subscription, you may have 10, you may have thousands of them. So how do you keep track of all of that lateral movement? It's very, very difficult. Again, how we do it uniquely and based on our patented technology is looking at activity. So we look at the activity of those permissions and access that we extract from those logs across AWS, GCP, Azure, and VMware. And that gives us clear insights into mapping that out using the algorithms we have to understand when this lateral movement is occurring or when privilege escalation is occurring. And then lastly, is that around anomalous behavior. I kind of hinted to this earlier. When we look at anomalous behavior, this is based on permitted access and permissions that the identity already has access to. So if we go back to the breach that we covered towards the beginning, and we look at what aspects of that were anomaly based, if that financial services organization had the ability to identify when that exploited identity was now using a whole bunch of permissions it had never used, that would be a big anomaly alert. If that financial services organization had the ability to identify when a whole ton of resources, in that case, hundreds of S3 buckets were being mapped out in a very quick fashion, we could identify access of those resources that, again, the identity had access to, but had never used. And then thirdly, or lastly, would be time of day and the quickness by which some of the activity was done, which would spawn other forms of anomalies. So there's a lot of interesting data that can be extracted from all of that activity. And we do that using machine learning. So we baseline on each and every identity, understand what behaviors it's normally using, and then we spawn anomaly alerts based on that anomalous behavior. Back to you, Mark.
Hello, everybody. I'm back again. All right. So there's three things you should know about your cloud: assign, manage, and monitor. Okay. So assign, manage, and monitor. Now, all these are equally important, of course, but I'm just going to tell you, some people fall short on certain aspects of it. Some people do a pretty, average job. all of it takes a long time to do. So what we do here at CloudKnox is we help you with that. We help to equalize all that out for you, give you more time, give you more resources, and of course, give you more security. And as you can see, everything's back to normal. Oh, you're seeing this part right here. Okay, that's the misdirection. See, if you look at that really closely, then you don't even see how the trick is done. You wind up with 3 pieces of rope, all the same size again, everything being equal, because here at CloudKnox, if you use us, you will not have a problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So here we get to our last segment, and Mark will be available to do more magic tricks too. And that is, how do I fix all of this? And what does CloudKnox provide? So we really have one platform for permissions management that allows you to bring together your hybrid cloud. So if you have AWS, if you have Azure, if you have GCP, or even VMware for that matter, you can do this all in one console. That provides the ability to assess those 5 key risks we highlighted earlier and more, and allow you to understand all of the permissions that have been assigned to identities, and furthermore, what's being used and what's not being used. Of those, which ones are high risk? Where is cross-account access happening? And many of those other aspects. In addition, we also provide the ability to remediate, and we do that through automation. So we provide the ability to also manage this and clean things up. And this really becomes a life cycle. We have to keep pace of what's happening in the cloud in order to ensure we're keeping up with all the permission changes over time and how people are accessing resources, especially when stacks are being spun up in a matter of minutes. We do this through 2 key things, that being just enough privileges, or our JEP controller. And that controller allows us to take that activity of what's been assigned versus what's being used, which is typically less than 1%, and take those permissions that are being used to set new policies for access and permissions and tie those to roles. So we basically can create a new policy based on least privileges. Furthermore, we can also incorporate those things that might be high risk. And that allows you to calculate a new policy that you can apply to your environment in the context of an identity, multiple identities, roles, resources, and more, even Lambda functions and serverless. But as part of the life cycle, I need to provide the ability for people to do stuff. So if Dave, the developer, is now working on a new project and needs access to something new, I don't want to lock him out by doing this process of trying to remove unnecessary permissions or ones that aren't being used. So for that, we have privilege on demand or just-in-time access built into the product and integrated with ITSM solutions like ServiceNow. So either through ServiceNow or natively in the product, you can allow a developer or other user to request access. And from that, you can provide either pre-baked templates based on those least privileges or individual tasks that they can choose from to request that access. And that'll kick off a workflow. The administrator will be alerted of a new request, can either approve or deny that request. And that becomes part of the whole life cycle in both, really pruning back over permissioned access and high risk tasks, but also providing access when it's needed. And then lastly, is that around monitor. So again, beyond assess and manage through the automation is the ability to monitor for those anomalies, as we've stated earlier. We also roll that up into something we call the privilege creep index. So you can measure over time how you're doing in terms of your privilege creep. So as your environment does grow like a carbon life form, how good of a job are you doing in terms of keeping up with those risks tied back to permissions? That's effectively what we provide, as well as a variety of reporting across your common compliances, as well as permissions analytics. So lastly, we do provide a free risk assessment. We're able to get up and running in less than an hour within your cloud environment by deploying a VM. So if you had an AWS environment with 10 accounts or 10 subscriptions, if you will, we can deploy one VM to monitor those 10 accounts or subscriptions. Same thing for Azure, GCP, and VMware. And then that VM will do an initial data collection. It's going to look at those logs like CloudTrail, Access Analyzer, Access Advisor, or in the case of Microsoft, Microsoft Graph, Azure Active Directory Graph, and those other relevant logs, and go back 90 days. This is a one-time thing, but it allows us to create that baseline we talked about earlier. And then therefore, 24 hours later, by the next day, you've got full visibility, full reporting, and access to the remediation tool set. So it allows you within 24 hours to get up and running truly in a production environment. We recently just deployed this with a global pharma. And in doing so, they had more than 1,000 Azure subscriptions. They were up and running in an hour. Then we did the data collection overnight. The next day, within 24 hours, they had full visibility, all the reporting, and they could leverage the automated workflows to auto remediate. So if this is something you're interested in, you can certainly reach out to your GuidePoint rep, and they can certainly provide the ability for us to do this free risk assessment for you. So we really appreciate your time. I know we've got some time left here. I know Mark has some more magic tricks. We can also open it up for Q&A as well if anyone has any questions. But with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mark.
All right. So do we have anybody with any questions that's like really pressing on their mind right now? Because Mike is ready to answer your questions if you need them. You can unmute if you have a question. I hear crickets. You guys want to see more magic? All right, let's do that then. We'll do some more magic for you guys. All right. Well, you know, since this whole COVID thing and we're doing all these kind of things like this, that we have to do it over computers and such, but oh, I'm not even allowed to blow into a balloon to make a balloon animal anymore. That's how bad it's getting. So I'll make you a balloon animal, but I won't blow it up. How's that? Ready, guys? Here we go. Okay. Okay, there you go. Can you see the little balloon animal there? I see some of you smiling, so you guys got it. Okay, great. All right. This is the world's oldest magic trick. In fact, this trick is over 3,000 years old. That means there was Egyptian people walking around going, oh no, not the ring trick again. The linking rings. Ring number 1, ring number 2, ring number 3, and ring D. So the trick's gonna be brought to you in 3D. Keep an eye on the ring here. Almost like you guys are right there. It's funny, the guy with the coffee mug hasn't moved the entire time he's been here. Okay. And my impression is Shakira. Keep an eye on the rings there. That's usually a part where people clap, but we can totally skip that if you guys want. Oh, thank you, girls and guys. Thank you very much. If you watch this one really closely, though, don't blink. Okay, don't blink, don't blink, don't blink, don't blink. Okay, you can blink now. M-I-C-K-E-Y, M-O-U-S-E. He looks close to me, so. And that's that. Thank you. All right. Well, we're gonna do Mario's favorite trick in just a second, but I got one just before that. It's a little romantic trick. It's about Romeo and Juliet. They were star-crossed lovers. In fact, they were as different as night and day. It's got a silver dollar and we got an English penny here. So Romeo and Juliet, they were star-crossed lovers. Their parents were always trying to keep them apart. The parents used to take Juliet away, but those crazy kids, they always found their way back together again. And Romeo was always trying to be kept away by his brothers from her. He stayed out late one night, though. He came up underneath her balcony, hid in the bushes. And she came out on the balcony and she said, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? That was Act 2, Scene 2, in case you were keeping score. When Romeo heard this, he leapt from there, ran across over to the trellis to be with Juliet once again. However, that night, her parents found them together, dun, 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 and decided to take her off to boarding school. the night before they sent her off to boarding school, those two crazy kids, they ran off together. Never was there a story of such woe as Romeo and Juliet. Thank you. And now, Mike, I'm sorry, Mario's favorite trick here. All right. Let's see if I can get somebody to maybe unmute and help me there. The gentleman in the black shirt with the watch on, with pointing to his forehead right now.
How you doing, Mark?
Good, man. How you doing? What's your name?
Good, good. Wyatt.
Wyatt. Nice to meet you, Wyatt. Okay.
Nice
So
to
Wyatt,
meet
I'm
you.
going to get a little bit close, and we're going to actually do a card trick over the internet. Probably something you don't see
Perfect.
very often. Okay. Can you see the cards okay from there, Wyatt?
Yeah, perfect.
You see them all? Okay. Tell me when you have a card in your mind that you like a lot. Don't say it out loud, though. You got one?
Yeah, I got it.
You got it? Cool. I want you to just concentrate on that card. You know the color, you know the suit, and you know the value, correct?
Correct.
Excellent. Use a wood frame inside your head there, okay? I saw it on Martha Stewart. It's a prison edition, how to make stripes go with orange. Okay. Got a couple of questions for you. Wyatt, first question is red cards, is black cards? I'm going to say your card was a red card. Am I correct?
Correct.
It was. All right. Hearts, clubs, diamonds, and spades. I'm going to say your card was a diamond. Am I correct again?
Correct.
It's getting weird, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to
Yeah,
lay
a
a
little
card
bit.
right over here, okay? I'm going to lay a card right over here for you. And I'm going to take a guess at this, and it's only a guess. I'm going to guess you picked the king of diamonds.
Not correct.
Wow, really? What did you pick?
8. 8 of diamonds.
The 8 of diamonds? That's so weird. I don't see any 8 of diamonds in here. Are you sure about that? Oh, I left the card over here, didn't I? You know, sometimes I get this, sometimes I don't. This time I did happen to get the 8 of diamonds, your card.
Oh my gosh. I never
Thank you.
understand these. Good job, Mark.
It's okay. You don't have to. I just have to be good. Okay. All right. Is it Jason with the coffee mug there? Jason really hasn't moved at all the entire time. He's just been so still. Are you there, Jason? Can you unmute for me? Jason Torres? Oh, he went to the bathroom, I think. Okay. Gentleman up in the corner over here with the glasses and the black ball cap on. That's you. Can you unmute for me? Yeah, with the coffee mug.
Yes,
Good. What's your name, sir?
Gary.
Gary, nice to meet you, Gary. You want to try what Wyatt just did there? Same thing. All you got to do is take a look at the cards there. Tell me when you got one in your head. You got one now?
Yes.
Okay, soon? Okay, good. Concentrate on that card. Same questions. Red cards, black cards. Somehow I think you picked the black one, though.
True.
Okay. Hearts, clubs, diamonds, and spades. I'm going to say your card was a spade.
Yes.
Wow. So far, so what? Okay. I'll lay a card right over here. I'm going to take a guess. Here we go. I'm thinking you went for, I don't know. It looks like you went pretty deep in there. I don't know. I'm going to say you went for the 5 of spades.
That was it. How'd you do it?
Was it?
Yes. So come on.
Awesome. You know, I'm almost as surprised as you are right now. Okay. Ashley, you want to give it a try since you're right there?
I do, but Karin has her hand up.
Oh, Karin,
Nice
Karin, did you want
redirect,
to do it?
actually.
I'm gonna pick on Ashley. She's right in the middle for me. Okay, so all right,
Okay,
Ashley, I'm not
let's
even gonna use the deck of cards with you. Okay. What I want you to do is I want you to take a deck of cards and place them into your mind.
Okay.
Okay. Are you playing with a full deck? Okay. You may shuffle those cards inside your head.
Mhm,
Are you shuffling?
mhm.
Okay. The blondes usually go like this. Right, Karen? Okay. All right. You ever been to Vegas?
Yeah.
You ever see one of those dealers spread the cards out on the big table? Do that for me in your mind. You got them all spread out?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. All right. I'm going to take a little peek inside your head. I promise to only look at the cards, though. Okay, here we go. Ooh, Ashley, you really shouldn't use a date as a PIN number. Put the cards face up too, please, for me. You got that? Perfect. There we go. So right now you're looking at the faces of all the cards just like I am right now. I want you to take one finger in your mind. Not that one. This is a PG show. Okay. And place it on the face of your favorite card right about now. You got it?
Mhm.
I'm gonna lay a card right over there. You picked a card in your head. I picked a card out of my deck of cards. If they match, would that be amazing or what?
It would be.
All right, name your card for me out loud.
9 of spades.
The 9 of what? Spades?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. That's weird. You sure you picked the 9 of spades though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Positive? Okay. All right.
Positive.
Well, I will say that I was kind of right. I got a spade, but I didn't get the 9 of spades. But you know what's really strange? I had a dream last night. You ever have one of those dreams that just kind of wakes you up?
Mhm.
That's the kind of dream I had last night. In this dream, I had somebody pick a card, found a 9 of hearts. I'm going to do this backwards in the camera here so I can see them. 9 of hearts. And I was trying to find all the rest of the cards. But for some reason, I could not find her card, no matter how hard I looked through the deck of cards. It's really hard to do on a little small screen right now. See any more 9s there?
Mm-mm.
Anybody see any 9s? I'll just let you guys tell
No.
me.
I saw 9,
So-
but of clubs.
Yeah, not spades though yet, right? No 9 of spades?
Mm,
No 9 of spades?
No.
No 9 of spades? No 9 of spades. So I woke up in a cold sweat. You might imagine this is my real job. I grabbed the deck of cards that sits on my nightstand. I pulled the one card that was giving me trouble and placed that card in my pocket just in case I ran into the woman in my dreams last night.
Oh, that's crazy.
Give her a nice big hand. You did a good job, Ashley. Thank you very much. All right. Well, I got one more thing. This one's kind of a surprise. None of the CloudKnox people even know I'm going to do this one, but I'm going to attempt to make a balloon animal for you guys, okay? I know I blew it up, but it's going to stay at my house, okay? So let's see. Good, right about there. And that is one good look. Oh, I'm sorry. That is one good looking dog there, isn't it? Isn't he great? Hang on a second. He's well behaved too. He's a little thirsty. Hang on a second. Okay, he should behave from here on up. Oh, gee. Can you see this? He just went to the bathroom. All right, he should be much better now. Okay, so we'll just give him a little bit more. Serious? All right, enough of you. Anyway, that's my new dog, Squeaky. And thank you very much, folks, for your time and attention. I really do appreciate you. You guys have a great day. Thank you for thank you to CloudKnox for having me come out and perform for you guys. It's been a blast. Haven't been doing a lot of shows lately. This is great to actually see people. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you, Mark. Thank you, GuidePoint.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.